tough new immigration law was born of frustration over illegal immigration in that border state and in an election year where conservatives are looking to regain momentum. The protests over it started at day one, and plenty of those were right here in South Florida, much of which, of course, is built on immigration. This week, it became a Florida campaign issue as Bill McCollum, the Republican frontrunner for governor who first opposed the law, came out in support, even suggesting Florida could benefit from such a law. Our conversation this morning begins with Cheryl Little, who is an attorney and executive director of the Florida Immigrant Advocacy Center, and Florida International University professor Dario Moreno, who directs the university's Metropolitan Center, which does polling and social research. And good Sunday morning. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start with the law itself. Cheryl, if you would, what is inherently wrong with Arizona's new law?
Well, first of all, it makes it a crime for immigrants to go about their daily business without having papers proving they're legal. And secondly, it gives police broad powers to arrest, detain people they reasonably suspect may be undocumented if, for example, they stop them for a routine traffic violation.
But how is that different than what we have now federally and even in this state? If people are stopped for a violation or a suspected crime, law enforcement is perfectly allowed to ask for some sort of identification or immigration status, are they not?
Well, they're supposed to ask them if they have a driver's license, and if they've committed a traffic violation, obviously they can ticket them for that. But this is part of a disturbing trend, frankly, that we've seen lately. For example, in Florida, a number of local sheriffs have requested ICE to deputize their deputies so they can act as ICE agents. And recently there was a scathing report regarding this program. It's called the 287G program by the Office of Inspector General, our government. And even though this program is supposed to target dangerous criminals, in 90% of cases, they weren't. In many cases, they're targeting people who've lived here for years, worked hard, paid taxes, have U.S. citizen children. 5% of the people targeted under this program have been U.S. citizens.
When you say targeted, what does that mean, targeted?
These are people who are being arrested under this program and placed in immigration custody.
This law went very political hot potato nationwide, and it was brought home to Florida in a big way this week with gubernatorial candidate Bill McCollum. Dario Moreno, he has gone, well, first he opposed the law, and then he said he supports this law as amended, and suggested that Florida might benefit.
Well, you have to put this in context, and if you look at sort of the history of the politics of immigration, whenever you have double-digit unemployment, a very bad economy, 500,000 foreclosures in Florida last year, over 1 million Floridians unemployed, there's always, in these kinds of economic times, kind of an anti-immigration groundswell. And we're seeing this not only in Florida, but across the country. And what has happened is that in Florida, this was passed by a very Republican legislature, and Republicans are under increased pressure from many of their constituents to get tough on immigration.
And especially if the latest poll nationwide shows that there are some, depending on how the question is asked, 60 to 70% of the respondents favor this tough new law.
Well, I think it's a, you know, in this sense, I think the Republicans have to be careful because there's a little bit of fool's gold. In 1992, Pete Wilson was able to get reelected as governor of California by using, 1994, by using Proposition 189, an anti-immigration, and even though it succeeded in the short-term goal of securing his reelection, it destroyed the Republican Party in California for 20 years. Only now is it recovering from this image of being anti-Hispanic in a very Hispanic state. So the Republicans really need to play this carefully, because while it might be good short-term politics, it could be very bad long-term politics. Secondly, while I agree with some of Cheryl's comments, I also think that there's a understandable frustration with many Americans about the issue of illegal immigration. And it comes to the issue of controlling the borders. And I think some of these things that came out in Arizona is because as California and Texas improved their border surveillance, over half the illegals who are crossing the border into the United States are doing it through Arizona. So, you know, why I personally oppose the law, I can understand some of the political settlement that has created it.
And that's because, if I may, Rick Scott, who is the new Republican in the race, a fairly wealthy man who's invested a lot in putting himself on television, and this week we see, as a Republican candidate for governor, he has really chipped away at what is still the frontrunner Bill McCollum's numbers, which is why McCollum, we suspect, came out very strongly this week in favor of this law to kind of show his Republican creds. And I want to show you, if we have a graphic of what Bill McCollum said. Having already opposed the law publicly, he now said this week, "I support Arizona's law as amended, and if the federal government fails to secure our borders and solve the problems of illegal immigration, I would support a similar law for Florida." Well, who determines if the federal government fails to do its job?
Well, in Florida's case, it will be the state legislature and the governor. And I mean, which is what happened in Arizona. The question, I think, is there are two things happening. One is the bad economy, plus the concern about illegal immigration. But we also have to be careful, and I'm talking sort of as a political science. The real thing that people are frustrated about is not illegals, it's the economy, is the foreclosures, is the lack of jobs, is this downturn which is affecting all of us. And when that happens, historically, 1850s, we can go through the history of immigration, the turn of the century.
1930s in
1930s. And this is not only happening in the United States, but if you watch the elections in England, it was a big issue in England. Spain, which had the most liberal immigration laws of any Western democracies, is now reviewing that because of the economic situation.
Let's weigh, the costs of enacting something like this. And in fact, many police chiefs across the United States have decried laws like this, policies like this, because they say, we've worked so hard to build trust with the immigrant communities, and if they're a victim of crime or if they've witnessed a crime, they're going to be far more reluctant to come forward. Besides, there are a lot of actual crimes being committed in the United States of America, and police need to focus on that. And I can tell you that in terms of border enforcement, I understand why people are frustrated. However, since September 11th, our government has done an awful lot to make our borders safer. For example, the number of Border Patrol agents has, I think, it's 5 times what it was. It's double what it was five years ago, okay? And we now have biometrics at ports of entry. We have a number of things. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security says that they're pretty much on target to do what Congress has mandated them to do to make the southwest border more secure. So you really do have to weigh things here. And the fact of the matter is, many, many people are going to be racially profiled as a result of this. I mean, this is an open invitation, Glenna, for racial profiling. We've received numerous calls from folks who believe of Hispanic origin, who believe they've been racially profiled lately. And in fact, we represent an 18-year-old girl who was picked up by Border Patrol at a tri-rail station on her way to Miami-Dade College.
In the Arizona law, which is here, which you read, it specifically calls racial profiling illegal. You may not racially profile, but I think you bring up a good point in that, is it the law that's bad, or the fear that the enforcement of it will become abusive?
Well, frankly, I think it's all of the above, because we're detracting off police officers from doing the job that they really need to do. The answer, frankly, in my opinion, is comprehensive immigration reform. That's what we need to do. We're far better off knowing who people are and where they are. That will make us much less safe, much more safe. I think right now that directives like this are making us less safe, not more safe. And if we were to have comprehensive immigration reform, let's give enough visas to people who we have jobs for here, who we need to come here in order to work.
Well, I think Cheryl makes a very good point that, and if you actually look at the polling data carefully, there is a consensus in this country. First, that we need to get a better grip on our border. And Cheryl's right that a lot has been done. probably more needed to be done along the Arizona border, from my understanding of the situation, because they were taking care of California and Texas first.